Thank you all very much. There's a great prayer, isn't it? If you'll open your teaching handout, we're going to jump in here together. And if you're new, we're talking about, as I said, turning a house into a home. Week number 1, we said, a lot of people today view marriage as a contract. Let's try it. If it works, great. If not, we'll go to plan B. And we said that's not at all God's plan. But there's a thing called a covenant marriage that changes how you look at it completely. Last week we said that men have this absolutely impossible task, and that a man is to step up, to lay down your life for your wife, literally, physically, if necessary, to protect, provide, lead, to cherish, to nurture, to help bring about, allow her to become what God created her to become. And now we're going to talk about you, ladies. And last week we learned that there's this sort of evolution that's happened in the American male. In fact, if you want to jot a note down, last Saturday, Wall Street Journal article, it's called "Where Did All the Good Men Go?" You want to read something that's absolutely amazing, very interesting. You would have thought that I got with this lady and we wrote an article together, and she just did all the great research, and I just kind of shared the highlights. But it's an amazing article about what has happened in the lives of men, especially men in their 20s. With that said, okay, ladies, are you ready? Hang in there. It's not going to be painful. God has a plan. And what I want to do is I want to give you a picture I want to move all the way back and give you sort of the evolution. Women and injustice are two things that have gone hand in hand for centuries. Women have been treated, and still are, in many, many parts of the world, in horrendous ways. There is an evolution that happened all the way from the time of Jesus. I'll start with that, with the Jews, the Romans, the Greeks. I'll talk about the 60s, quickly the 70s, and the rise of radical feminism. The change that occurred in many of your lives, that many of you, if you're under 45, you just don't know any different than what happened in the 90s. And so I want to give you ladies a picture of kind of historically what's happened, because a woman today has to ask some fundamental questions like, so what is my role? Who am I? How do I relate to men before I'm married? What's my role in marriage? Should I work? Should I not work? How much should I work? When we have kids, what should I do? What's good? What's bad? What's wrong? What's right? I will tell you, it's confusing. In fact, the average woman we're going to find has expectations and is overextended beyond anything any human being could do. And a lot of it is just because you don't have a clear picture of God's design. And when you don't, and when a man doesn't, what we see is what's happening. Marriages don't work. And so, ladies, let's start back. The Old Testament did not teach this, but by the time of Jesus, the Jews had developed a very low view of women. To them, a woman was a servant. And in fact, when a Jewish man would get up in the morning, he would pray this prayer every day. Now imagine being sort of in the kitchen, hearing your husband go outside the door and pray this prayer every day. God, I thank you that I am not a Gentile, a slave, or a woman. Amen. Kind of puts you right up there, doesn't it? All right? Well, it gets worse. The Greeks were worse than the Jews. In the Greek world, there was no legal procedure for divorce because it wasn't necessary. Wives were called to clean the house and have legitimate children. An Athenian orator named Demosthenes said, I'm quoting, he says, "We have courtesans or prostitutes for the sake of pleasure. We have concubines for the sake of daily cohabitation. And we have wives for the purpose of having children legitimately and being faithful guardians of our household affairs." Because Greek men found their pleasure outside the home, fornication, prostitution, and all kind of sexual perversion flourished. The Jews saw you women as a slave. The Greeks saw you as an object of their pleasure to use and abuse however they like. In the same period of time, the Romans, if it could get worse, were. Divorce was not the exception, but the rule. Jerome is an ancient writer during the time of Rome, and he tells of a Roman woman who's married to her 23rd husband, and she was his 21st wife. That had to get ugly. Marriage in Rome became nothing more than legalized prostitution To a Roman man, a woman was disposable and dispensable. I mean, now think of that. Well, there's still countries all over the world. And lest we take ourselves off the hook, did you know that until 1920, think of this in our day, a woman could not vote in the United States until 1920? Are you kidding me? A woman could not vote in Switzerland until 1971. In 1965, if a woman applied for credit, she could not get credit or a credit card or have credit unless her husband or a male relative would sign for her, because they all knew that a woman could never be responsible enough to actually hold down a job and be reliable. Now, you know, guys, sometimes you wonder why some people got pretty ticked off and the whole radical feminism movement moved in a direction. I got news for you. You live under that kind of thinking, you can see where it came from. Feminism, by the way, is not a dirty word. It's a controversial word. Webster defines feminism as the principle that women should have equal political, economic, and social rights, and it is the movement for them to have those equal rights. Now, radical feminism is quite different than feminism. Radical feminism was a movement, probably now the National Organization for Women probably expresses it the best. In the 70s, radical feminism flourished, sort of all this pent-up anger about women's injustice. And here was their motto. They declare, it is now time, forgive the graphic language, it's from their literature. It's now time to drop the boot heel into the groin of patriarchy. Now is the time to fight back. No God, no master, and no laws. Radical feminism sought to change the education, the military, and the world. Women's study groups like in Wellesley or Smith College and others grew up, University of Minnesota. And I would read, they have actually a warning label on the women's studies. I can't read it all. It's a bit too graphic, but it basically says to parents, if you have your daughter enroll in our women's study, we will tell you, we will turn her against all your morals, all your values. She will reject and hate her father and pity her mother. She will, all likelihood, change how she dresses, possibly her sexual orientation. And we do want you to know you will have spent tens of thousands of dollars and you will have lost your daughter. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I want my daughter going to that school. But do you understand the fury? Well, what that produced was a view of what makes a woman legitimate. You need to understand, in the way cultures work, whenever there's extremes, if there's extremes over here, it always pulls the middle to that direction, wherever the extremes are. So in the 1970s, I have a U.S. News tracking 30 years study of women's views of their world. So they had 5,000 people that they tracked for over 30 years, 70s, 80s, and 90s. In the 70s, what you hear is women draw a line in the sand and say, you have real value as a woman if you have a career. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you're wasting your life. You know, it's kind of like barefoot, no education, whatever. And so there was a strong movement to say a real woman must work. By the 1980s, the same group was surveyed, and they said, I think we got a little bit more than what we bargained for. So now I have a full-time job, and I have full-time with kids, and I have a full-time husband, and I'm full-time stressed out. By the 1990s, they survey the same women, and they make some radical, there's an article here about an executive with Microsoft, another executive who was a trial lawyer, and they talk about, you know something? There is a season to work, and there's a season for family. The difference between how women viewed those who work inside the home and outside the home was completely vanished, and women did full circle to say, the greatest, most privileged job of a woman is not simply how much money you make, but the quality of relationships and a commitment first and foremost to the home. Not saying it's wrong to work at different times, but saying when push comes to shove, all the things that we thought would make us really have trapped us in a world where the demands are over the top. There's 100% of the demands out there at work, 100% of the demands at home, and 100% of the demands and often much guilt about not being the mother that they long to become. With that, what you have is a mother-absent family developed. To give you the net of this, in 1920, 1 out of 5 women between the ages of 20 to 50 worked outside the home. Fast forward into the 1990s, 4 out of 5 women worked outside the home. The results, Men loved it. They got 2 incomes, right? Now, you may think we're in a little downtime, but if you go do the research 30 years back, the affluence in America has never been over the top, primarily because of 2 incomes. So, but what women got was 2 jobs. Now, yeah, we have more money. The lifestyle, the number of people that had homes, the number of people that had nice TVs and nice cars went up. The quality of life went down. And kids got too little attention. And so what we found in this radical movement, and as it settled out, violence is up, divorce is up, SAT scores are down, teen suicide is up, and depression is up. And the fundamental question to ask today as a woman is, your life, your marriage, and your family better now or worse after the last 40 years of sort of the politically correct experiment? And what I met a young gal, about 28 years old, on a plane about a month or so ago. She speaks 5 languages. She was on her way to a big interview with Delta. It was going to be an international job paying very good money. And I just asked her, I said, well, you must be very excited. She goes, I'm very, very excited. I said, so how does your husband feel about this? Because she shared, as we talked, they'd been married 18 months, maybe 2 years. And, oh, he's very excited too. I said, well, having traveled overseas quite a bit, I said, you're going to be gone for like 2 weeks to 4 weeks at times. Yeah, I know. But she goes, it really doesn't matter. I said, really? She goes, yeah, we only see each other for a half a day on Saturday now. He works for this high-tech company and does this, and I work here, and he works this shift, and I work this shift, and so when he comes home, I leave, and we're both really tired, so we have a whole half day on Saturday together. And I kind of looked at her and said, now, are you doing this on purpose? But see, she is the product in her mindset, and she does not have a clear role of what do I really want, what is my role. I will guarantee, fast forward that relationship 10 years, likelihood it won't last 10 years. And second, she'll come to a way where she speaks 5 languages, makes a lot of money, travels all around the world. Her husband, because of that distance, will drift in one way. She'll drift in another. They'll probably go through a divorce. If she has a kid, then she'll feel like, now what am I going to do? I spent all this time, all this energy. And just feel the tension? In fact, some of you, you're living in it right now. So what does God say? What's the picture? What's the profile? Men have this impossible job. Women now have an equally impossible job when you hear how politically incorrect God's instruction is. Now, the only thing I can tell you is that it works, contrary to what people are experiencing now. And so it always begins with mutual, right? Just review, what's the word? Submission, right? We're in Ephesians chapter 5. The umbrella, real quickly, if you weren't here last week, let me encourage you to get the CD or go on the web and download it for free. But it says, but be subject to one another in the fear of Christ. And so we've learned in Ephesians this new creations that we are, just like Cecilia who got baptized. Brand new creation from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of night. The Spirit of God lives inside of her, lives inside of a follower of Christ. And it says, first and foremost, forget what the man's to do, the woman's to do. I say, God, I want to serve you. I want to walk with you. I want to obey your word, what it says about time and life and money and values and relationships. And then inside this umbrella of our mutual submission to God, we mutually submit to one another. So before I hear one command about stepping up as a man or one command to me as a woman, well, it's hard to say that up front, but you know what I mean. As a woman will hear it. Is what I need to say is, I'm living under Christ, and I want to say, how can I serve you? How can I love you? How can I make your life more successful? So you need to hear these commands. It's under that assumption. And with that, we understand that just like men, for the dance to work, remember, it's a metaphor of a dance. It's not who's in charge. It's not who does what. It's not who takes the first step or the second step. God gives roles. So there's this beauty of a dance where there's rhythm and beauty. And that requires clarity of roles. A man needs to know, I got to step up, provide, protect, lead. And a woman's going to learn she needs to step in. And here's what God says to a woman in the 21st century. Wives, be subject to your own husbands as unto the Lord. Well, why? For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church. So whatever the relationship between Christ and the church, that's the relationship between man and woman. He himself is the Savior of the body. But the church is subject to Christ, so also wives ought to be, the assumption here, subject to their own husbands in everything. Would you underline in that first little paragraph the word subject or submit, wherever that comes, and will you circle the word head? The word subject or submit means exactly the same thing as it did last time. It means exactly the same thing as my submission to God. Hupo, under, tasso, rank or order. Every group, every situation, every club, every government, every relationship, there's always the buck stops somewhere. And so he says there's nothing to do with inequality, obviously nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with value, but there is a role and a connection to make the relationship work. The word head has the idea of the source or authority of the person who owns the responsibility for the outcomes of the relationship. Now, here's the impossible reminder for men, which makes it, by the way, easy to submit to. Husbands, love your wives. Well, how? How much? Well, love her the way Christ loved the church. Well, what did he do? He gave himself for her. Why? That he could sanctify her by the cleansing of her, by the washing of the water with the word. That he could present to himself a church in all of her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she, the church, could be holy and blameless. Application. Husbands ought to love your own wives. How? As your own body. You love your wife even more than you love yourself. He who loves his wife indeed loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it just as Christ also does the church, because we're members of his body. Application. Nevertheless, each individual must also love his own wife. And then, ladies, even as himself, he goes on to say, and let the wife see to it that she respect her husband. Put a circle around the word respect. It has the idea of reference. It has the idea of honor. The literal word is phobia. We get our word fear, but it's not a fear like I'm afraid of. It's a reverence or honor. It's saying God has created this system, and this is the role of the man, and he's going to give his life for me, and I'm going to respect that position, and I'm going to honor him. The greatest need, ladies, you want to know the key to your man's heart? The key to your man's heart, what he's desperate for, is to be honored and respected and esteemed. A man's biggest fear is futility or failure. That's why it's so hard in relationships with women and parenting and being a dad. And so we as men, we compensate. So we put our energy out at work or sports or hobbies. Why? We know what we're doing there. I know how to shoot a ball. I know how to play softball. I know how to work. And it's easy out there. It's measurable. They give you numbers and zeros. And, people tell you you're great if you do it well and you make money. But you ask that same man, what's it look like to lead your wife spiritually? What's it look like to confront one of your kids? What passage do you take them to? How do you model it? And you think, I don't know, my dad never did this. And so as men, what we will tend to do is compensate out there. And what a woman needs to give a man is honor and respect and support and step in to say, you know what, you can do this, and I'm for you. A woman, however's greatest need is security. The greatest need is we're going to be okay. You're going to take care of things, right? And so when you don't have a man leading like that, and the women have listened to the culture, and the men have listened to the culture, what a woman does, she compensates by taking control. And you know what? I'll tell you what. I'll make sure our finances, I'll run them. I'll make sure the kids are okay. I'll run it. I'll make sure this is the thing where it needs to be because, you know what? Here, that doesn't look good. Wear that. We shouldn't do that. Do that. And so men have these worlds out there, and then they come home, and if they're not real careful, they go from being strong men in the world to little boys at home with a new mama telling her what to do. And I tell you, over a period of years, men don't like being a little boy, and women don't like having little boys. And you play that out, it has all kind of implications for every area of your relationship. Women don't always like a strong, powerful, sensitive leader who provides and protects because they don't always get their way. And by contrast, men don't like to be nagged and have someone tell them and remind them by body language, by size, by criticism, both especially in front of children, that you don't really measure up. And those are our defaults. And so what happens is, in general, the woman figures out how to find security somewhere, and the man figures out how to find success somewhere, and it's usually outside the marriage, so that's why it doesn't work. And so God says, I have a better idea. I'm the choreographer. You don't have to agree with it. I made the sexes. Men, step up and lead. Women, step in. Step in, not over, and support. And all the things that you want from your man, when you step in, you give him an opportunity to obtain. And men, all the things you really want from your wife, you get when you step up. And all I want you to know is, if you feel like this sounds crazy, this sounds hard, this sounds like I don't know how to do it, welcome to the NFL. I mean, part of our commitment here at this church, we're going to do this. And we're going to help each other learn. At the end of the service, Trisha's going to come up, and if you're a single woman, a single mom woman, a never-been married woman, a woman who's been divorced, a woman who's in a tough situation, or a woman where things are going great, and you want some help about how that works, she's going to say, hey, it's here today, just like last week for the men. But this is not like, oh, yeah, let's do this, and it happens tomorrow. This is foreign. This is difficult. But how's things working out there for you? How's the average marriage working now? It's not. The average young person is saying, I don't want to get, 40% of the people in America say they don't even believe in marriage anymore. So let's then talk about, well, what's it look like? Let's put some handles on this. Wives are to step in, and then would you underline, these are the key words, wives. Stepping in means support, affirm, and encourage their husbands. How? With strength and respect. Why? To lead families in righteousness. Let me say that again. This is your divine job description from an all-knowing, all-powerful God that wants you to have this sense of security, this intimacy, this protection, and this joy in your heart. He says your role is not to step over, not to take the reins of control. Step in, but how? Support, affirm, and encourage. Words like, you can do it. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's looking for all the ways that your man does something well and affirming him in those. You know, I got news for you. All that stuff about men's egos being fragile, it's all true. I mean, it's really true. And beyond that, we're desperately insecure, just like you are. And there's nothing greater than to hear from someone you love, you're doing well. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Wow, I noticed how you talked to our daughter. I thought that was really, wow, I really appreciate you putting in a lot of long hours. You know what? I know you're really committed to us and our family. Those are the kind of things that makes a man want to step up and say, yeah. All that stuff about knights and chivalry and all that. When a woman expresses some need, I need your help. Would you help me? I'm not sure about this. You know what it does to a man? Hey, I think I'm needed. In the average home, the average guy thinks she knows 10 times more about everything than I do anyway, so just let her do it. And when I try, I'll probably get criticized. And I don't need any more of that. So you step in. But notice it's with strength and respect. 3 things this means. Number 1, wives must understand that marriage is not an egalitarian 50-50 proposition. In other words, the goal is not, well, I have a say, you have a say, and if we can't agree, we'll get an arbitrator. This has nothing to do with value, intelligence, inferiority, strength, or ability. This has everything to do with structure and function. Let me read a passage. Jot in your notes. You can get it later. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 3. Notice the structure God gives. He says, now I want you to realize that the head, the authority, the one responsible for every man is Christ. And the head of the woman is man. And just before you swallow hard and go, I really don't like that, listen to the last one. And the head of Christ is God. What we know is God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and God the Father are co-equal, of one essence, 3 persons. There's absolutely no inferiority. But God the Son, out of structure and function, willfully, joyfully, voluntarily submits to the Father. Not my will, but yours be done. Because he knows his Father is perfect and good and kind and loving, and the Father has a role, and the Son has a role, and the Holy Spirit has a role, and there is perfect harmony and love and relationship before he created anything. God does not need you to have a relationship. There is perfect unity and love and relationship in the Godhead. And what he's done is given us responsibilities that mirror that. And it works, but it requires faith and dependency to do it his way, which really goes against, I don't like to submit to anything or anyone personally. It's just sort of a personal thing with me. It's called being human. And you're the same way. None of us want anyone to tell us what to do. That has to do with sin. And yet God says, if you will follow my design, and here's my design, it's not 50-50. The man has this awesome, amazing, overwhelming responsibility to be the head. Second, wives must voluntarily support their husbands from the heart as an act of obedience. That's from verse 24. The church submits to Christ, so the wife submits to the husband. By the way, in Greek, it's in the middle voice. The middle voice means you do something that reflexively comes back for your good. So you submit. This is a good thing for you, for yourself. Support and submission to your husband is not a cross to bear or an ought or a should or a pain that God's put into your life. Voluntarily primarily has to do with your heart to say, you know what? Submission at its heart has not that much to do with your husband. In a minute, I'm going to, well, not a literal minute, but in a couple minutes, or you know what I mean, in a little while, I've asked my wife to come and share how this kind of works out. Because what I've watched and what I've learned is, ladies, the real issue isn't submission to this man. The issue is God is big, he's powerful, he'll protect you. Am I going to obey what God says? And even if this guy, you're thinking, I'm just thinking this is not a good idea. I'm just thinking the steering's a little loose on this one. Yay. You know, here's what God says. Guess what? I got control of the road. Submission is about what you do in your relationship with God from the heart joyfully. And you know what? Just like you'll make some mistakes, your husband will make some mistakes. Just like the guy you're dating is going to make some mistakes. But if you control the relationship, guess what you'll get? You'll get a little boy someday that you will resent, and he will resent you. Third, wives must believe that submission, stepping in versus stepping over, is a woman's greatest ally and the key to bringing about positive change. Let me read that again because that is very counterintuitive, right? I mean, your greatest ally would be the thing that would help you get out of the relationship what you want the most would be submission versus, say, nagging. How's that one going? Anybody get any success with nagging? How about leaving Bibles or CDs or books? You know, like how to be a more loving, communicative, romantic husband. You know what your man does? He says, wonder why she's reading that. Can't believe that one. Wonder why she's reading that. I'm the husband. Or how is withholding affection working? See, women, let me just say, I've done a little survey. Here's 5 or 6 things that I believe from my non-exhaustive, non-scientific survey that women want. Women want husbands that are more romantic, more responsible, who lead spiritually, who will take financial responsibility, and who communicate more. Are there any women here that would kind of like your man to be a little more romantic? I guess not. We'll just move on. No. A little more responsive, maybe pick up his stuff, a little more lead spiritually in the home. Can you imagine your husband? Oh, let's stop right now. Why don't we pray right now? Hey, kids, why don't you? Anybody looking for any of that? How has what you've done so far been at bringing that result? And if the answer is not very good, then what I want you to know is that submission. And by the way, let's get a picture of what this is. And Teresa pictures it in just a second better than I can. Because I realized as I was studying this week, I can teach what it says, but I don't have a clue of how it really works inside of a woman's head. In fact, I don't know how it even works in her head. I learned some things this week about how it works. Some were good. Others not so much. Quick diagnostic questions. When a major decision needs to be made in your home, who would your children say holds the most influence? Who defers or submits? Big decision. Your kids are kind of watching. What should we do? If your kids said, now, where's the real power in the room? And who's probably going to say, oh, yeah, honey, let's do that? You or your husband? When conflict occurs, what will the children be allowed or not be allowed to do in terms of, okay, we had an issue with our kids. The wife thinks we ought to do this. The husband thinks we ought to do this. Who usually defers in that situation in your home? Who submits? When a major purchase is being considered, whose thoughts, opinions, and influence are most often the final say concerning cost, timing, color, and affordability? You or your husband? In general, which spouse in your home has the greatest sense of security and peace and well-being, knowing that things are carefully planned out, they're thought through, and someone is owning the responsibility for the marriage, the family, the children? I'm glad I've got a part, but that's taken care of. Husband or wife? See, what I'd suggest is, unfortunately, most women are thinking, that's me. That's me. And most guys, most of us will say, if you want to do all that, we'll let you. And at times when we've tried a little bit, and we got criticized, and I don't do it like that, and I use it on QuickBooks instead of this, and I think you ought to do that, and, I don't think you ought to. You know what? Here's what you'll get. Tell you what, you want to run this, dude? Go ahead. Just go ahead. And you'll find him working more. Hobbies increase. See, last week, we were pretty strong. Men, you got to step up. Remember that? Remember? The coach came out. It's hard to step up if there's no room. Someone's got to step and let that man. And that means for a lot of us guys that didn't have a dad who we've ever seen this, that means there's got to be some allowance. There's got to be some, hey, let's give some time here. I don't need criticized when I'm taking risky steps to step up. I need a lot of affirmation, encouragement. But here's what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you're to be passive or feel inferior. Tell you what, you will see in just a second. I love this because my wife, maybe it's just sort of her demeanor too. She just sort of has that, I bet she's such a sweet lady. Well, yes and no. When we disagree about things, there's nothing in her that goes, oh, Chip, you're a pastor, and I'm sure your great wisdom is what we ought to do. What I get is, now look, honey, I've prayed about that too. And what about this, and this? And if this happens and this happens, what do you think? See, that's bringing it with strength and with beauty. And now, she's not attacking me. She's basically saying, with a lot of logic and facts and prayer, I just think this is really dumb. But she doesn't use that word. And often, after we've discussed it, I come to these amazing conclusions. I don't think I'm going to do what I thought. But see, it's a team. So submission has nothing to do with being passive and whatever he wants. It's bringing your A game and bringing a team together to say, what's the will of God? What's highest? What's best? Second, it doesn't mean that you submit only when you think he's right. I mean, that's called agreement. I mean, if you already agree with the person, that's nice, but that's not submission. Submission is those rare times when you both can't come to the same conclusion. In our family, it was so often around disciplining our kids. Or often the other area was money. Not in the basic stuff, but she always had this concern for security, and I had this concern to give it away. And what I learned from my wife is that we actually needed to have some retirement, what she needed is we need to progressively learn to give more percentages all the time. And somewhere between those, God gave us his will. I had a wife who, because she was a single mom for a while and she's very nurturing, I mean, my lands, when my boys were teenagers, they could talk her into anything. And, they would do some stuff, and I'd say, warning number 2. Okay, we'd write a contract. If this behavior continues, you will be grounded for 5 days. You agreed, you wrote it, right? Right. Now, if you do this, they were just black and white stuff. I'm not talking about piddly stuff. and it was really wrong. When you do this, you're going to be grounded for 5 days, and if the prom comes during those 5 days, you understand, you will miss it. If it's a ball game, you will miss it. You get it. Well, then, they would do it, and they go talk to Mommy. Mommy, I can't believe, Dad. I mean, how many proms do you get to go to in your whole life? And, she and I would go like this, and I'd say, look, honey, okay? Tell you what, I want him to miss the prom. Oh, you know what? They'll get over it. Real men need to understand you make decisions and there's consequences. It's not like the first time. Warning, warning, this is the way it goes. Men, especially young men, need that. And they need it from their dad. We didn't disagree. She didn't like it, but we got on the same page. Do you understand what I'm saying? See, that's how it works. A lot of times I had to change my mind. A lot of times she had to change yours. But over the years, we've learned you're a team. Third, it doesn't mean that you violate scripture, reason, or morality to support your husband. Your husband asks you to do something that's lying or unethical or illegal or, I was praying about wife swapping sounds like a really good idea. You tell him, it doesn't to me. The first submission is always to God and to his word. Number 4, it doesn't mean you're a doormat. You bring it with strength, you bring it with beauty, you bring it with passion, you bring it with reason. You don't just roll over. That's not helping your husband. But you don't do it degrading him. You don't do it yelling. You don't do it out of control. You don't do it, attacking his past. You don't do it attacking his past failures. And fifth, it doesn't mean you use submission as a tool to get your way. That means like being really sweet and kind of saying, oh, yeah, I'm kind of on board on this for this little season so that finally we can remodel that kitchen. Or we can, you can't manipulate. I asked Teresa to come last night and just I asked her 3 questions. The first was, what's helped you the most? Because this is so radical. And she, both of us come from not good family backgrounds. Second is, what's been your biggest challenge? I mean, be honest. And then third, what would you say to a woman here who says, I hear what you're saying, but my situation, I'm pretty afraid to let go of the reins. I'm afraid some big stuff will fall through the cracks. She's in a battle right now, and we're winning it, and she's in radiation for breast cancer. And so she didn't have the energy to do all 3 services, so she came last night, and we've got this interview on the screen. So, Teresa, welcome. Question number 1. What has helped you the most in fulfilling God's role, especially in this area of submission? What are the positive factors that have helped you do that?
Well, I got to think about this today. Chip told me tells me at the last minute that he's going to ask me these questions. So I asked him can we just spend a little bit of time together and tell me, what are you going to ask me so I could have time to think about it. And I came up with 3 things that have been real helpful for me in being able to submit as a wife. And I was thinking one of the things Chip did, one of them I did, and one of them we did together. And what I have to say about my husband is that he has been a wonderful leader in our home. He's a strong man. I have a real man in my house, and I'm very grateful about that. But he has been a man of God. He doesn't just make decisions hastily without a careful thought and prayer, and I respect him. And so I feel secure. I feel like his leading is good, and that I can entrust my life because I know that he's hearing from the Lord. So that's number 1. That's probably been one of the greatest things for me, and I know all women don't have that in their homes. The second thing for me is that just because I love the Lord and I love his word, I want to obey God, and his word tells me that I should be submissive to my husband and I should respect him, and so I just strive with all of my heart to be able to do that. And I pray, I ask God to help me. I claim his promises from His Word when I don't understand what's happening and I don't feel like submitting. And I know that God will always take up my cause. He cares for women. He cares for wives. And He could make the worst mistake, and He's made a few, I have to say. But God is watching over me. And he does that for us as wives. He will take up our cause for us. The Lord will. He's the one who cares for us. And the third thing that's been real powerful for me in submission is that we talk about everything. Is communication is really a key, I believe, in a good marriage. And we've truly worked at communicating. We spend time nearly every day talking about what's going on, what we're thinking about, what we're struggling with, what our dreams are. And so we know each other's heart. And when big issues come up, it's a lot easier then to talk about things when we disagree because we've communicated so well when we're not disagreeing. So I think those are just three of the major things. That.
Good. What has been your greatest... why did I write these questions? What has been your greatest challenge in your role in this area of submission, and how do you or how did you deal with it?
My greatest challenge is submitting when I don't want to submit. It's just I don't want to do that. I don't believe that's the right thing to do. So that is a challenge. And like Chip said, when our children were growing up, probably the biggest issue that we just knocked heads over was disciplining our children, and also another issue was our taking care of our home and repairs and just doing things to make our home better, and we've had many conflicts over that because we see it differently, and it's been hard for me to submit sometimes when I wanted to have things done and you just don't see it at all. In fact, we were talking about this yesterday, and we were having a little discussion about something about the house that needed repaired, and he said, you just care too much. And he said it in a kind way, and I said, I said to him, well, you just care too
little.
Yes. And so we understand each other, and I pray. I just pray a lot, and God changes His mind, and we get it done anyway. And another time, I'm probably talking way too much.
Hey,
but,
it's Saturday night. Let's have fun.
But it's just moving. That's probably been of everything is the most difficult times I've had when Chip has really believed that God is leading us to a different place, and not here. I wanted to come here, but it's. I like to be settled. I don't like to leave my friends and my home and my kids, and I really, in one particular move, just gave him a real hard time over that, and what helps me when we have those issues and when it's very difficult for me is just crying out to the Lord. I really do want to do God's will, and so I just claim His promises, and a promise that I claimed many times is from Romans 8:32, and it says, He who spared not His Son, but gave Him up for all of us, how will He not, our God, with Him freely give us all things? And I have realized that we may disagree, but if He strongly believes God is leading us in a certain direction, and I submit and follow Him, God's going to provide everything that I need, because God's just like that. I hope you know that. He's just like that. He loves us. And I think the last thing that I thought about here is just, well, you already said it in the message. I state my concerns. I'm not shy about that. And we just...
I will echo that. She is not shy about that. But that's very important, though, because if you bury him, what happens? It comes out in other areas. You'll be resentful. So I think it's way better to say, I mean, we did one thing, and I think I made the right decision. I think I really did it at the wrong time and the wrong way. And she just looked at me and goes, I will submit to this. I want you to know I don't think it's a good idea. I don't want to do it. I will go, but... And it couldn't have been stated any stronger. And I will have a good attitude, but...
I didn't have a good attitude a lot, though. I struggled with my attitude, but I finally got there. Sometimes it's a struggle, you know. It takes us time. It takes us time to work through those things. It doesn't
Well, let me ask you one last question, and that is, what counsel or what would you say to a woman who's, from her perspective, feels like her husband's not leading well, and she fears? I mean, she's thinking, okay, now, if I do what I believe God is teaching here, things are going to fall apart. If I let go of the reins in this area, you know, maybe it's our finances or spiritual leadership of the home or something. If I let go, I'm really afraid things are going to fall apart. What would you say to that lady?
Well, I think, first of all, the woman she needs to ask herself, am I really willing to submit to my husband? You know, am I really willing to allow him to lead in a family? Because there's so many of us that we want control, and we want to run our homes and our families, and so we have to be willing, first of all, to allow that to happen, and secondly, to just remember that when you do that, God cares for you, and that He will take up your cause in whatever situation that you're dealing with. He will take up your cause for you and work in your husband's lives as you submit to the Lord, submit that situation to the Lord. And another thing, I'm big on prayer, but pray for your husband. God can change him, and He can He can move in his heart and change circumstances. And I would say, give him room to change. Give your husband room to change. Sometimes we see people act a certain way for so many years, and we want them to change, but we never give them space to change. We don't give them the time and the belief in them to change. And so give them room to change. And just the last thing that I thought about was kind of a motto scripture for my life with Chip and our marriage is out of Proverbs 31, and it's talking about a wife here in relationship to her husband, and it says that she does him good and not evil all the days of her life. And I just think that's the best thing. If we could keep that in mind, you know, in any situation, does this do him good? Am I doing him good, or am I doing him evil? And sometimes doing him good means that we submit to something that we really don't believe is God's will for our life, but He really does. And sometimes doing him good is not doing things for Him in the home and caring for things that He really needs to take responsibility for. And so it can look different. But if we would just strive to do our husbands good and not evil all the days of our lives with the Lord's help, I think God will do amazing things.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. And as we, the triangle, we had a little triangle that we talked about as the man and the woman, as you move closer to the top to God, you can kind of hear that we both come from really dysfunctional families. We both come from alcoholic families. This is a real journey and a process. But what you see is as you move closer in your relationship to God, He really will work in you and through you, and with lots of bumps. We've certainly had lots of bumps, and as I guess you heard, we still have a few. But that's normal. I don't think that's going to end. But our heart's desire is to see you embrace God's design for your relationship, or God's design for your future relationship, And I can tell you now, 32 years later, every area of a relationship that you can imagine is richer and deeper and better than I thought it could be, and way better than it was the first 10 years or the second 10 years. So, honey, could you pray for the just the women tonight, and then I'll close our time.
Okay. Father, thank you for the women in this church. Thank you for making us women. We just appreciate the role that you've given us as the feminine sex, and as wives and moms. And Father, help us to hear from you. Help us to not look around at the world and just the things that we try to do outside of ourselves to make us be important and worthy people. But Father, help us to look to you and find our worth and all that we need in you. And Father, help us as wives to love our husbands, to respect them, to pray for them, to do them good all the days of their lives as we live on this earth.
And Lord, I pray that you would help us as men to live in a manner that would be worthy of respect. And will you give us grace? We definitely need much grace to take the first steps and trust you for the future. In Christ's name, amen.